I'm really excited to have Karol Urban here today. Thanks to Professor Dominguez for making it happen. Karol is a re-recording mixer and a supervising sound editor who has just an astonishing resume. Tons of Marvel shows, Made for Love, Outlander, Grey's Anatomy, Scandal, How to Get Away with Murder, on and on. If I listed it all, we wouldn't have time for the talk. So hand it over to her right away.
Got old, guys. I kept working. Yeah, that's it. Cool. So this is fun. Before I do have a little bit of a presentation kind of generally on what a re-recording mixer is. And I have I'm open for questions in any aspect of a sound post. I brought some other images based on your questions that maybe can help. I'm not sure where everyone is in their development though. So I'm wondering, I know there's like a hand raise feature because I noticed a lot of people don't have their cameras on, which is fine. It's totally cool. But if you happen to be studying sound, is there any like just so that I know where we're starting from, anybody who's studied sound recording or is looking at sound as an industry, a potential industry to go into, has any experience in recording studio, knows basic sound concepts, can I get it like a hand raise or a little like click next to your name or something? Is that possible? I don't want to bore too many. Oh, cool. I got hands. I got hands. Okay, one. No. Okay. Okay. All right. Cool. How many of you are interested in things like a film school, like directing, producing, script writing, creative positions? Can we get a hand raise on that? Oh, excellent. Ooh, future clientes. Right on. Okay. Cool. All right. Sweet. Um, oh, cool. All right. Awesome. How about picture editorial? Is anybody interested in picture editorial? Like wants to be a picture editor or graphics? Yeah. Okay, cool. All right. So it sounds like we got a mixed bag. Awesome. I think a general presentation is going to be perfect. Just want to make sure I wasn't getting too crazy with people. So I made a couple nerdy slides. So just so you guys know, in general, what a re-recording mixer and a sound supervisor is. I'm just going to give you guys kind of a general scope. A re-recording mixer is and I'm going to get killed for this oversimplification, but if you're new to the concept, this is maybe a good generalization. It is a essentially a collage artist with a number of different ways to manipulate the different pieces of material that are coming together to create the overall soundscape soundtrack of a television show or film. So let's take a look at some slides here. Let's see. I don't have screen share as an option. Okay, here it is. Okay, cool. All right, I'm a liar. All right. And okay, can everybody see that? Because of course you guys go away when I hit the button. All right, you guys see that? You see a big thing that says dubbing or re-recording mixer?
Yes.
Fantastical. Okay, cool. All right. So what happens in a mix or a dub? Look at me. I'm getting nerdy. It's great. I love colors. All right. So typically the black box right there, that is typically the re-recording mixer or the dubbing mixer's position. Um, the music will go to that guy. The Foley person's going to go to that. Foley's going to go to that guy. The dialogue, ADR, production dialogue, production sound effects, PFX going to go to that person. Um, the sound effects are going to that person. I see I got a duplicate there. And sound effects, sound design, backgrounds, hard effects. So essentially everything that you hear in a final soundtrack, you're going to hear in that mix. So let's talk about what each of these kind of elements are. The music is going to come from a composer, typically, or from a commercial cue from a music supervisor. So that can mean anything from like, a cool tune by T-Pain, or it can be something really awesome by Bear McCreary, composer, whatever, John Williams. Um, that material gets sent in. The Foley, and Foley is typically sound effects that are recorded, performed live to picture. There is a distinction between Foley and general sound effects. It can be a little confusing, so let me make one small distinction. If I have a hand clap, you just saw me do that to picture. So if I were to look at a picture of somebody clapping their hands and I record myself going, that makes it Foley. If I go to a library, I see somebody clapping hands, pull a clap out, sync it up, and put it in. that would be a sound effect. So do you see the distinction? So Foley is live performed, custom to picture, and the other is a sound effects library. Uh, I'm imagining the question that comes to everyone's mind is why not just pull everything from the library? Because every texture of footstep, every weight of character, every depiction of type of glass, type of table, etc., should all have a different resonance and sound. And Foley is, when performed custom, is extremely realistic, and that's what we're going for here. Uh, the time and labor required to put in every single footstep, even if you could find the perfect pre-recorded sound effect that happened to match that incident, is going to be so labor intensive and so time intensive that it's not fiscally viable. Not to mention, it typically just doesn't sound as good. There's wonderful things that Foley artists do. They really embody the character. I know multiple Foley artists. I worked on a show once called Kingdom that was about like MMA fighters. And there was a very small young lady who performed all of the physical fight sounds of these MMA fighters, and she was able to embody the sounds of like a big huge guy and also like a tiny petite woman and everything in between as a result of her skills as a Foley artist to be able to know how to put weight into the recording, which is not necessarily, it doesn't look like she's doing exactly the moves that you're hearing, but the sound that's coming out matches those moves perfectly. So a Foley artist knows those different things. Also, a Foley mixer, who's the person that deals with the miking and proximity of recording and the recording management of the mixing board and capturing the Foley artist performance, is also really good at making sure that they're capturing the sound in a way that makes sense for what we're seeing on screen. So that is what Foley is. That would also come to a dubbing mixer. Also, we have sound effects, backgrounds, hard effects right here. So those type of things are, again, like I guess for ease of example, would be the hand clap. The other thing it would be spaceships and gunshots and alien screams and all kinds of crazy abstract sounds, all the sounds you hear. Also, it would be the sound of room tone, the sound of air, the sound of birds, anything you hear under basically dialogue. So this, I apologize. It looks like I was a little excited to make my colors and I made an extra little block here. Perhaps it's also because I loves me some dialogue. Dialogue here encompasses not only production dialogue, which is what is recorded on set, but also ADR, which is similar to Foley in the sense that an actor will come in and speak to their picture, recording lines that will either be ad lines, which are kind of off camera, things that weren't recorded in production but need a match, or to their lips because there might have been a sound in the background, a technical problem, a performance that wasn't everybody's favorite for the one line, a plane that goes overhead. For whatever reason, the production sound in that moment for that take was not usable. So they do ADR. That is also one of the cool things I get to do as a re-recording mixer is I get to play with uh, the frequency, the reverb, the space and placement of ADR to make it match seamlessly with production, and that is a whole art in itself. Also, sound effects are PFX. PFX are production sound effects, and what that means is it might be that on set somebody does put their glass down, and that perfectly amazing metal chalice on that table sounds exactly the way you want it to. So if it ain't broke, yeah, let's use it. So that is what that is. We can also top it with a library effect to give it dramatic emphasis, but also to give it some grounding in reality. So that is basically what a mixer does. Now, what is a sound supervisor? Sound supervisor is essentially the head of the sound editorial department. So the sound mix department is this little black square in the middle. The sound editorial department takes care of the arrangement, placement, and choice of material that comes in all these other squares. So you'd have a Foley editor, you'd have a sound effects editor, you'd have a dialogue editor, an ADR editor, you'd have a music editor. All these people are sound editorial. A sound supervisor typically manages the materials coming to the final mix, as instructed by the client, as desired by the client, and also using their professional expertise to say, hey, you really need to ADR that. That's not going to work. Or, this is a moment here where we could do some really cool sound design and it'll make a big difference in your narrative. So that's all what the sound supervisor manages. One distinctive note, the music editorial typically comes from a composer. So that is a separate department. Music is a separate department. So there typically tends to be sound mix, sound editorial, and music. Okay, moving on. All right, so here's a picture of all the cool little different spaces that you can mix stuff in. There's a huge variety. There's single mix studios. So here's this one. I worked in this one at Discovery on the East Coast. Sounds cool. Little various little toys you can play with. This is a 2-person dub suite. I worked on this studio for a while. This is the backfield. The backfield is where the clients sit. So there, can you see my mouse? Is that actually visible? Okay, good. All right. So this would be mixer 1 and mixer 2, and this is the backfield. And we'll talk about whether what a single mix and a multiple mix chair means in a minute. So moving on. Here's another one. This is over at Formosa at Paramount. So I would typically sit here. My partner would sit here. Our clients give us notes back here. Here we go. Here's another one. So see how they can look different but similar. So you got mixer number 1, mixer number 2. You've got yourself a sound supervisor typically, maybe a sound editor over here. You got your mix tech here. You got your clients chilling out back here, enjoying some coffee. Yeah. There you go. All right. Typical dub stage. So what we just saw here, is this useful, by the way? Is this good? Okay, cool. All right. I'm looking for some okay. All right. So, so typically on a typical dub stage, you get the screen, whether it be a projector or sometimes I've actually seen really amazing giant screens, which is really incredible. That's kind of a new thing that's coming out right now versus, the projectors that have been used in many years past. Then you've got the console. You can have up to 3 mixers and really large productions, and especially on musicals. You might have somebody who concentrates on music mix, somebody that concentrates on dialogue, and then someone that concentrates on those Foley backgrounds and sound effects. Yeah. In a single mix situation, that person handles all of those things. In a 2-person mix situation, you typically would have somebody split the sound effects on one side. So that's Foley backgrounds and hard effects, library sound effects. And then on the other side, you've got your dialogue, your production effects, and your music. And they kind of work together in tandem to create the final soundtrack. Your backfield, however, is where your clients hang out. It's where your supervising sound editor hangs out. And it's where your music editor and your stage editors hang out. On smaller shows, you may have one person back here. On even smaller shows, you may have a supervising sound editor mixer. So you'll have one mixer up front in this little black box that will represent the sound editorial department as well as the mix department. So there's many different incarnations. Over here in this little orange square, this is possibly my favorite square because this is my partner in crime. This would be our mix tech. A mix tech is someone who handles all the different aspects of the stage, deals with any monitoring or technical problems so that the stage can keep rolling. Typically, when you're in mix, it's quite expensive to the client. And so having a mix tech, no matter how much you may think that this is something that you can cut from the budget, I promise you're saving money by having them there and just paying it up front. Because otherwise, whenever there's a technical problem, something that needs to be imported, something that needs to be managed, files that need to be named a certain way, QC, which is quality control notes from a broadcast or distribution, all the technical aspects of what we do, that person is watching our back. And when the mixer is here, center stage, dealing with a bunch of clients, a sound supervisor, a music editor, a bunch of stage editors, things are coming at them, fixes are happening. It's very hard to see the forest for the trees sometimes. Our mix tech keeps that wide lens going on the dub stage and makes sure that all of us are focused. So the goal of all of this is to create a beautiful soundtrack. So outside of the wonderful aspect of it, before I get to the next slide, I'll diverge for a moment. The goal is to make a beautiful soundtrack. And in creating a beautiful soundtrack, what we want to do is encapsulate the vision of the creatives. So we want to be able to see with the eyes and ears and mind from the perspective of the director, the producer, the writer, are the loudest voice in the room, which is what I mean by the loudest voice in the room that has the most weight in the decision making process for a particular project. That person, we want to make sure that that person gets their notes addressed and that their vision is what we translate. So one of the things I want to tell everybody who's interested in getting into any type of filmmaking process that supports a larger vision is that this is a village situation. It's a community that creates an end product. It's not your movie. It's actually it's a community. It's a collaborative effort. So I always hazard anyone who would even be interested at all in sound at all to make sure that your goal is to reach the vision of the creatives. When you write your movie and you produce your movie, you can make it sound however you want. You want to make it sound the way the vision of the creators, the vision. And many times that requires us to watch the film, take a stab at it with the notes that were given in the beginning about what their vision is, and to step back later and go, okay, so that's not how you saw it. That's cool. Hear the notes, listen to them, communicate, elaborate, collaborate, suggest things. They may want to make their audience feel a certain way, but perhaps what they've employed in their guide track or with their editor or in their mind isn't maybe the only solution that they have. Maybe as a sound person, there's 10 other ways to get there. So you can say, hey, have you thought about this way or that way? Suggesting is a good thing, but feeling the space out and making sure that you're being efficient with your time and that you're listening to your creative. That's the most important part of our job. We are vessels for the vision of the creator. So, with that in mind, there's also something else that we do for our creatives, and that is we make the technical stuff disappear. We just take care of it. That's what we do. That's our job. So, so in addition to making the creative happen and just appear and become effective emotionally, which is the beautiful creative part, there's also this amazing aspect to our job, which is technical. So these are some technical requirements, basically. So uh, each project is different. Amazon's got a different quality control spec than Netflix. Um, Theatrical typically has a different loudness kind of spec and different EQ curve because of the room that it's typically reproduced in. Each place has a slightly different flavor about what they want. So theatrical is typically concerned with not only creating the full mix print, which is the full mix in both situations, whether it be streaming, broadcast, episodic, theatrical, what have you. The full mix is your final soundtrack. All of those incarnations below that, and there's many others than these. These are just common ones that you get. These things are all created to allow for a different versioning of the piece that you're creating. So, for instance, when I worked on, just worked on Echo recently. When I worked on Echo, we had to make an M&E, and we had to make a music track and an effects track and a dialogue track, all at mixed levels. So if you played them all together, that would create the, and a full M&E is something that replaces all the sounds that would occur under dialogue. We have to be able to remove dialogue and have all of the sounds of your hands, your shirt, little cable movement, all that's got to sound natural, so that when they record all the dialogue again in Portuguese and Spanish and Russian and whatever many languages they sell it to in different areas of the world, that they can just replace the voice and all those little teeny tiny noises that make things sound authentic are in that mix. So that's a whole process in itself. Also, we have isolated at mixed level things like a mix minus, oftentimes for episodic, especially for documentaries, which is minus dialogue without all those little sounds. Or you'll have things like the music and effects mix or the sound effects stems, the music stems. These are all separate elements, and they're all used as tools to create versions, which is how networks and distribution make money off of our beautiful creative content. So there's a technical aspect to what we do, as well as a creative aspect. Within being able to deliver these things and create something that is in the vision of the filmmaker, the other challenge of a mixer is to fit loudness specifications, peak level specifications, to make sure we don't over compress, we don't have any artifacting, like any error, any audio error, any distortion. All of that is a play of acoustics and a whole bunch of processors, plugins, old school cutting, finding alternative takes. Oftentimes, you'll hear a sentence or see a sentence performed in a television or film, and maybe two syllables of a word were pulled from a different take that were just sped up just right and placed right on the mouth just right, so that you'll never know the difference. But you won't hear, the guy in the background who dropped a plate in the middle of it. All of that is what we do. So that's kind of generally what we do. And what's really cool about it is it's super fun. I get to be very creative. I get to be super nerdy. I get to work with creative people. Sometimes I work alone. Sometimes I work with cool comrades. Here's some of my comrades: my buddy Ross, my buddy Gary, my partner in crime, my husband and also sound supervisor Steve, my buddy Kurt. We've mixed many things together, and it's a lot of fun. So yeah, I mean, come on, this is me making money. How great is that, right? Huh? That's that's pretty great. Here's us on Grey's Anatomy. My buddy Tom, he was a sound supervisor on this, and he actually handed over the sound supervisor, um, uh, I guess, I don't know, baton to Jen, who is now the sound supervisor. And this is Kurt and I who mix those shows together. Here's some more shows that we work together with our crew. Just a really good time. It's wonderful. And I've been able to create really diverse narratives. Like clearly Stephen King's The Stand is very different from New Girl, or Hentified or Boomerang for Lena Waithe, or, Station 19 for Shonda Rhimes. It's all very, very different work, which is great. So at this time, I'm going to stop screen sharing. If I can figure out how to do that. All right, cool. I am a technical person. And I'm going to open it up for questions. I know I just kind of at you guys. So what can I tell you? Is that helpful? What do you have any questions? What can I do for you? Hey, Brenda, how's it going?
Hi, Carol. What software?
You didn't think you were going to have your image up there, huh?
I did. Oh, I know. I've known Carol for a very long time, and we're just so fortunate to have her share her time and her knowledge with us. She's one of the best re-recording mixers I've ever worked with. And thank you so much, Carol. And thank you so much to the students for being here. Really, really appreciate it. Carol, what software do you work on? What are
So I work on Pro Tools, but there are places in the country or in the world who use different editing systems. Pro Tools is by far the industry leader. In fact, if you were interested in this field, I would say don't waste your time learning something else first. Pro Tools is going to be the most omnipresent. That being said, there's many incarnations to Pro Tools. So if you are learning Pro Tools and are interested in doing some audio work professionally, do be aware that there are many different forms and capacities within the software based on the setup. For instance, in one of those multiple mixer situations that I just showed you guys, each one of those mixers has their own Pro Tool system, and then there's a recorder system typically as well. So those Pro Tool systems are working in tandem with one another to gather all the information from each mixer station and put it together in one system, which is then played back in the room. That is part of the wonderful work done by the mix tech, who I was talking earlier about being like kind of the stage angel. At the same time, if you're a single mixer, you may have one system and you may record all of your files back into that one system, and that may be all you need. So there are many different aspects of Pro Tools. Anybody else?
I had a question. I wondered if you could just talk a little bit about your path, how you got to where you are right now,
Sure.
and how you arrived here.
Okay. Well, I mean, let's see. I don't want to spend too much time talking about my path, but I will give you guys a general sum. So yeah, I have crappy eyes. So I was always very, like I had a deformity as a child. I had really bad eyes, and I became pretty obsessed with sound as a result. I became a musician. I'm from a little town in Southern Virginia. So what I do here in Los Angeles and what I've done for the last 27 years professionally didn't really exist in the marketplace that I grew up in. I thought I was going to have to be a performer. And then I thought, oh, well, gosh, maybe I can be a composer because they have music in movies and television. So clearly somebody's got to write the music. It actually didn't occur to me until, I don't know, probably late high school that, oh my gosh, there's probably a person that makes the sound so perfect that it doesn't just go into the mic like that from the set. Yeah, that took me a while to perceive, which is, understandable, but also kind of amazing when you consider that that's exactly what I do today. As soon as I realized that that was a person's function, and also listened to before and after and saw the difference in how many subconscious effects that sound can make on a person's experience. Even how you EQ a voice, making it warm or making it sharp, can change your overall perception of the information that's being sent to you. It's incredibly impactful. In fact, my slogan for my company is I play mind games with sound, because that's truly what we're doing here. We're creating worlds. The choice of birds does make a difference. The choice of wind does make a difference. Is it a squeaky jalopy car or is it a smooth car? That says a lot about that character. Whether footsteps assured and heavy or are they clumsy and loose? That all says a lot about the story. I remember my father, he was a chemical engineer for aircraft carrier reactors. Said to me at one point, he goes, "Oh yeah, I've seen that show. Man, that villain was terrible." And I thought to myself, we made him terrible. I saw the cut before we did sound. The big note was nobody didn't like him. He was too likable. We made him not likable. We brought in the eerie tones. We made his footsteps heavy and deliberate. Like all of that is very subconscious. So once I got hip to the fact that you could control perceptions that way with sound, I fell in love, and I basically made that my career goal. Um, I came out during a very fortunate period in time in the industry where they were switching from proprietary mixing systems to Pro Tools. Um, my youth, um, and and essentially, I had Pro Tools knowledge because I had to pay for school myself. I had five part-time jobs in college. Never worked so much in my life. Real life is easy, guys, when you have five part-time jobs. But I got out of school, and I had three of my jobs were uh, maintaining, building, and teaching as a lab assistant the the recording studios on campus. So when I got out of school, I got a job at a post production house that did America's Most Wanted. That was their big credit in DC. And I basically said, I want to come in and set up mics and shadow your mixers. And they said, well, we really don't need mixers right now. What we need is a web page designer and someone to do multimedia. And I went, well, I'm young. I can do that. I know how to do that. I built it's cool. I want it. And they're like, great. So you do that. And I'll do it nights and weekends. And I'll just shadow you guys when I should be working to learn. And they went, okay, that's deal. And so I did that. And before I knew it, in about 6 months, they needed a new studio, and the proprietary systems were at that time like $500,000 a pop, really expensive. And so, and it also took people, you had to fly people in to build them. And it was a whole thing. So they said, can you build us one of those, their Pro Tool systems? And I went, yeah, I got you. So I built one of those, and I helped train the mixers before me, the real mixers. I was just a multimedia assistant at the time. And in doing so, basically found myself in a position where they were like, well, Karol can fill in for that. Well, Karol can do that. And then I started mixing. Honestly, I started mixing on political ads and industrials and government videos, ballistic missile systems conference videos. Like real sexy work, guys. And slowly started working on better and better and better work. I came to, fast forward 13 years later, and I was the senior re-recording mixer, or they call them sound designers on the East Coast. Which means you're an editor and you're a mixer and you're an ADR recordist. You do a lot of the jobs that I mentioned as individual, as a single job, and you're a single mixer. But I worked on titles like Planet Earth and Atlas and Koppel on Discovery, and I was working at Discovery Channel. Um, did that for 8 years. I was kind of burnt out a little bit on documentaries and edutainment, and I wanted to diversify. They started this new channel called Investigation Discovery, where I started doing a lot of serial killer limited series which had all these reenactment videos, which were very much like little movies. And I fell in love again. And I realized how important it was to have the sound of the cup be strong, or the sound of the fist down be weak, or what that said about the characters. And then I moved to Los Angeles and I worked on anything and everything I possibly could. Promos, reality shows, scripted shows, really bad indies, really good indies, student films, and eventually found myself auditioning for a union job and continued to move my way up. 27 years later, I'm really blessed to go to work every day and do my absolute favorite thing in the world. That's it. Oh, I think there's a chat question. Hold up. All right, wait a minute. Look at this pop-ups. Hello, Miss Carol. I wanted to ask, what is that dynamic like working with the creatives in the process? Is it hard sometimes or is it pretty smooth? That's a great question. Both. Yes, all the things. Most of the time, your creatives are wonderful people, even if it doesn't necessarily start out very smooth. Sometimes I'll start working with a producer or a director or a creative, and I'm not seeing from their eyes yet. I'm not hearing with their ears yet. I'm still not grasping the way it is that they're digesting their material. And sometimes it takes a little bit to get there. However, sometimes that process in getting there can allow you the opportunity to get to know them at a deeper level. And in the end, that can even be better than the relationship that's smooth all the way through. Because you've discovered each other, you found a lexicon to kind of communicate back and forth, and they begin to trust you because they know that you're really trying to achieve what it is that they want to achieve. So sometimes when things aren't smooth, that can actually just provide the path to get to know your creatives and to be able to serve them better. It can even allow for your position to be more artistically collaborative because they trust you. Other times you get people where it's just like, "Ooh," you know. I'll be honest, I actually prefer my clients a little picky. I do. I like them to push back a little bit. I like them to say, I want to take another look at this, or that's really great. I love what you did there. Can we go further? Or, you know what? I see what you did there. I'd like to go a different direction. I like that process of getting to know my creatives. It helps me to understand my narrative deeper. And for me, that's my favorite part is I love telling stories. So yeah. So yes and no. I hope that answers the question. Willie. Yeah. Ooh, oh, there's another one. Okay, cool. Look at this. Okay. What was the hardest project you've worked on and why was it difficult? Also, what is something you wish you knew or told before going into your career? Okay. Hardest project. Oh my gosh, there's so many different types of hard, you know what I mean? So I don't know that I can say there was one project that was super hard. I mean, I've had ones that logistically or scheduling hard. I've had ones that like She-Hulk had something like 63 picture conforms. That was hard, but it was also my like one of my favorite jobs to do ever. So I mean, it depends. They're all difficult in their own way. I think that's part of the gift of what I do is that it's bespoke. There's a general goal and mission that must be accomplished at the end, but getting there is a bespoke process of collaboration, and it's unique to the team, unique to the narrative, unique to whether it's theatrical or going to one network or another, whether you're working in one facility or another. It's all so unique. So I don't know if that I can really say that I had one that was the most difficult. I can say though that if I had to give advice to you guys, and this is I think is for every career. It took me probably 20 of my 27 years pushing faders and turning knobs to realize I was actually succeeding. Even though when I look back, I see that I was very much on a linear path for the most part. I mean, it's a little bit like the stock market sometimes, but for the most part, upward trend. It took me a very long time to be able to appreciate the upward trend because I'm very goal oriented and I had a vision of what success looked like. And I kept placing that vision as I'm not successful until I reach that. And so I didn't allow myself to see all the work that I had done and to recognize that success isn't a subscribed predestined vision. And furthermore, your path doesn't have to be like anybody else's path. You can get there many different ways. I started on political ads. That's not a common story for people in LA. I talk to people all the time who are like, oh, I worked on the 4th of July as an assistant. I mean, some people work on really great stuff, like right away. Some people go in as techs. Some people go in as machine engineers. Some people go in as QC techs. It can be many, many different paths to your goal. And your goal can be many, many different things. You don't have to want an Oscar. Nobody said that's the highest peak. Nobody says it's the highest peak. I'll tell you what I want. I want a cult film. I want a film 30 years from now that they like open the theater and they re-release and everybody comes in costume. That's where I'm rolling. You know what I mean? Everybody's got different dreams and aspects and visions, and your vision and your goal can change. That's okay. And if you're just doing what you love every day, even if it's at a lower level, that's still success. Celebrate that. Don't punk yourself. So I got a little preachy on that one. Sorry, guys. All right. Let's see. Justin, is that the next one? Okay. Yeah. You said you auditioned for the union. What was that like? Or did you also send in a portfolio? Okay. So a lot of people have portfolios and reels. And I think when you first come out of school, that's probably a good thing when you're talking to other sound people. And maybe if you're a very, very new filmmaker or another doing a student thesis or something. But truthfully, I had a reel. I don't even know if I showed it like 3 times. I don't even have a reel right now. I'd have to make one. It's pretty much who you worked with before, the credits that you have, and how well you jive with the creatives. And it's pretty easy to tell whether you're going to be able to get where you want to go with somebody if you have a conversation with them. There is also in Los Angeles, in this particular market, there's a presumption that you know what you're doing technically because there's 10,000 people who can do it technically. You've got to be the unique answer to that person's problem. And so being that person is more important. For people who are new coming out in the field, make your reel. Absolutely. Go through the process. Do all that you can to kind of get your stuff together to help introduce yourself. But for the most part, develop relationships and look for opportunities. Just in the beginning, you take it all. You take it all. You hustle. You work the long hours. You do the crazy, and in the end, the clouds will part and a path will find its way to you. So I hope that answers the question. Oh yes, and the audition for the union. Yes, I basically just had a union show that said, "Come in. We're going to mix something a scene that we did last season. If I like it, maybe I'll let you mix one of our shows." And then if I keep liking you, I'll keep you. And that was the audition. It was pretty stressful, actually. I'm not even going to lie. But I did okay. I did all right. It helped that that I listened to many seasons of the show before I went in the audition. So I was wearing the eyes and the ears of what I knew the client wanted. That was important. I got the feedback from the client later that many people had auditioned for that role and they were coming in trying to reinvent the wheel. I knew they had an established world, so I was creating my version within that world, and that worked. So I think that's probably important. Do you see work with the same people often, or do you often move on? Yes. That's the answer, actually. Yes, you do move on. And you work with the same people lots and you cross paths and we're all kind of buddies. It's really a high school graduating class for the most part, as far as I can tell. I even work with people who I worked with in Virginia every once in a while. I'm like, dude, where have you been? Like that happens quite often. I keep in contact with everyone. Don't make enemies. Try and get along with everyone. Some people aren't my cup of tea, but that doesn't mean I can't find something in some way to respect their collaboration and contribution and a way to at least frame the way that they give their information in order to make it constructive. That's a very important skill. So yes, you see the same people, and yes, you see a lot of different people, and yes, you move on. Let's see, what is your experience with working with TV composers and mixing their scores? Gosh, a lot, actually. Yeah, a lot. I love composers. I was a composition major for a little while, and I was a competitive pianist when I was younger. And I love music. In fact, I love all sound, but I tend to gravitate to dialogue and music. Not that I don't love me a horror film or a sci-fi where I get to play with, the bangs and the kablooies. Those are nice. But I love composers. I find what composers do to be incredibly difficult and really admirable. because essentially they're coming up from sounds from nowhere. There could be a myriad of different styles and approaches. That's a really wild box of variables to narrow down to give me an actual score. I might have a cool picture about this one. Visual aids. Did I come prepared? Okay, hold on. Maybe not. Maybe I did. Hold on. Okay, yes, I do. Yes, I don't. Yes, I do. Okay, so I want to show you the picture of mhm. I have a. Let me see if I can find it. I have a picture of a delivery from a composer, from a music editor. So that might be useful to you guys. Okay, here we go. Is that it? Aha. Yes. Okay, that is it. All right, guys, let me share something with you. This could be fun. All right, I thought people might ask questions that I could have pictures for. See, I love visual aids. All right, cool. Even though I am a sound person. All right. Okay, here we go. So everybody see that? Okay, so this is like, they aren't always this wide, but this is pretty typical of what I get nowadays. So this was for a show called Big Sky. And So you can see the orchestra, the choir. Basically, composers are going to deliver you the scoring mixer is going to record all the musicians, and they're going to mix it into what the composer and the client have generally approved the music should sound like X, right? I get that, but then of course I have backgrounds in Foley and dialogue and ADR and group. I didn't even mention group. That's kind of considered part of ADR. That's where you have actors come in and do the walla 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 behind everybody's crowd scenes, and they have cool things like call outs. So like, when you see the EMTs walk by, they'll be like, grab the gurney. Yeah, that's like, those are actors that come in and do that. So all that stuff's underneath. Got dialogue going. There's a whole bunch of stuff going. There's a whole story. They've likely edited picture, which is why you see edits here from the original score. That's what the music editor does. Is the music editor continues to conform the composer's intent to the moving picture and different things that arise. Like for instance, if I was working on this episode, and I can't even remember this episode to tell you if this is actually the case, but it's hypothetically, let's say there was a massive explosion in the middle of it, right around here where this music picks up. We'll probably need to tap the music or do something to some elements of the music to allow room for the explosion, even if the music has already been mixed in its entirety to sound like the music should sound. So there's still mixing to be done when integrating it into the other elements. However, the goal is always to present something as close as possible to what the client has approved, and to represent the composer accurately, but to also foster the overall narrative of the story. You'll notice that the composer delivered things in different stems, and the reason they do that is actually so that I can play their music more. If you give me one piece that's got everything in it, you get your horns with your percussion, with all your different instruments. All I can do, if there's something else that needs to be heard, is turn everything down. But let's say this plays beautifully, but for whatever reason, the synth is in the same pitch as, I don't know, the woman who's speaking during this section here. Now I can actually make the choice to either move that synth, either pan it out of the middle so that you can hear that dialogue more apparent, or EQ it a little bit around the words, just around a word or two to make sure you can hear the diction of what she's saying. Or I can turn down just that stem and we can still keep everything up nice and big and beautiful. And you can have that lovely emotional element of the music. Is that helpful? That's helpful, right? Yeah. All right, cool. Is there more stuff here? Hold on. Oh, nope, that's the last one. Cool. Oh, there's a hand up. Yeah, is it Josu? Jose?
Josue.
Josue. Oh, I messed it up. I'm sorry, Josue. Josue, how's it going?
Going good. I appreciate you coming. I was on the phone, like I was listening to it in my car, so it was almost like listening to a podcast. I can't look at it, but I'm just gonna listen. My question was, well, I guess I have two. My first one is, how far into the process of like a TV show are you contacted?
That is a great question.
And then my second
mhm.
question, I guess I'll just give it back to
No,
back.
it's all good.
Do you have
Yay,
I
balloons.
did not do those balloons.
I thought it was excellent. It was dramatic effect. I get it. It's cool. Yes.
My second question was, like, who are your favorite? I guess since you work with composers, if you have any favorite composers and or like artists that you listen to that you're like, oh, I really like their vibe. That's just like,
Well, I mean, Atticus and, Trent are killing it. I mean, they're awesome. I also did a composer on Made for Love, Kiefer Ciencia. I really like him. He's got a really cool sound. I loved that show. Like I don't always like shamelessly plug my own stuff. That show is really great and the music's fantastic. I worked on Loki. And Natalie was really great. Loki had beautiful sound. Oh my gosh, the theremin in that is stupid cool. But really, it's again all about the narrative. Like sometimes there's nothing more fitting or gorgeous or incredible than the classic musical score. Sometimes it's nice to have kind of a coffee cafe kind of sound. I did a show called Tiny Beautiful Things with Catherine Hahn and Hello Sunshine last year. And that had kind of like a coffee shop kind of emotional kind of, it was beautiful soundtrack. So whatever fits the narrative is the answer, but do I have favorites? Yeah, sure. Yeah. Let's see. The other one was When Do They Bring Me In? Yeah, that was it. Okay, so the sound supervisor comes in earlier than the mixer. So if I'm doing both, I get in earlier. If not, I usually get tapped by a sound supervisor or a post production or a post producer, and they'll pair me either with the sound super or the sound super will be like, "Hey, this way, we're gonna do this thing together," and I'm like, "All right, cool." So if I'm just doing the mixing, typically the sound supervisor will contact me after they've had what's called a spotting session. Spotting session is very important. Spotting session is when the sound department watches with the picture department, with the picture editor, and the lead creatives, the loudest voices in the room for whatever project. Sometimes it's a writer, sometimes it's the editor, sometimes it's the director, sometimes it's an EP, sometimes it can change. But the loudest voice in the room for a particular project will meet with the sound department and they will talk about music. They will talk about what sounds they want to keep. They will talk about how much they either love their guide track or want to change, or if they have a sound challenge, or if they're worried about a scene, or do we need to ADR or something. All those discussions happen with the sound supervisor in kind of the very beginning once picture lock is typically attained, or at least close to attained. You typically don't want to turn over material, at least for a television show, without picture lock. For features is a little bit different. You deliver things in reels, and that's basically because you're likely still working on some editing and some VFX, and there's not quite picture lock of the whole film yet. So you can work on reel 1 or reel 4, even if 2 and 3 aren't done yet. You can kind of insert those later. So it depends. And each project is very, very different. I've been brought in sometimes on the concept of a show, which is super great. I've also been brought in literally 3 days ahead of time where they're like, yeah, we needed a mixture for this. Our other ones fell through. Make it happen. So, yeah. Let's see. Let's see. Was there another question in here? Oh, when you work on shows, do you work with them for multiple seasons, or do different mixing crews cycle through shows per season and episode? Yes. So I've been very lucky. Like, for instance, I did like 200 plus episodes of Grey's Anatomy. But I also, when I worked on New Girl, I came on for the last season of New Girl with Brenda. So it depends. I've also, I worked on National Treasure: Edge of History for Disney Plus last year. I came in for the last 4 episodes of that show based on mixer availability. So it depends. Typically speaking, I think I can speak for clients in saying that consistency is best as long as they're happy and you have availability to match the flexibility they need for their scheduling. I think most people prefer to work with the team they know. Re-giving notes is kind of a pain in the butt. So yeah, but yeah, it happens. Sure. Armin, how's it going?
Hi, Armin, actually.
Armin, oh man, I'm terrible at this. Okay.
No, you're good. So mine's more of a life question. You
Okay.
mentioned earlier that you start off as a musician, and for me, I find myself fighting this idea of being like a jack of all trades, and I'm like
Mhm.
telling myself, oh, just try to stick with one thing. But there's so many things that I like to do, and I was just wondering if you have any insight to offer about, I guess, maybe moving around, or if you've worked with anybody who's worked in not only sound but also other parts of the industry.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, one of my favorite supervisors to work with is a woman named Marla, and Marla started off studying directing and going into directing. So yeah, no, absolutely. And in fact, Vicky Sampson was a sound editor for 30 plus years. Her mother being the first woman to ever win an Oscar for sound editing, actually. Just fun fact. But she's a director and a writer now. So do people move around? Yes. In fact, I am currently writing a script right now, which I probably shouldn't say out loud because it's probably going to be hideous, but it's fun and it's nice to kind of look outside of your world. I was inspired to go this direction, and I don't know if this helps you, Armin, but because I find what the people in adjacent positions, especially my creatives, what my clients are going through, to be advantageous for me to understand. So I'm the type of nerd that will go to like the PGA, which is the Producers Guild of America. I'll go to their conference just to see what producers are dealing with. Like, what are they dealing with when they come to my room? Like, how much stuff are they thinking about? And how much do they really care about sound? And so, like, when I talk to them, how much am I annoying them? Like, how much threshold do I feel like they have to hear about my issue? Like, how am I going to phrase this to be effective, basically? So, and that information is important, I think. I also just took a course with the Alliance of Women Directors. I audited a course for directing actors, because I was like, gosh, like I wonder how that goes, how that works. I know how that works in ADR, but how does that work on set? Like how is that process? How does that happen? And so I worked to understand a little bit more of that. I don't think there's anything wrong with learning. And if something, catches your fancy and is interesting to you, I mean, just go through IMDb. You'll see a bunch of people who are like director on this, actor on this, producer on that, sound editor on this. Your path is yours, your goals are yours, your dreams are yours. Yeah, it can happen.
So we're a little bit
Thank
over,
you.
but if there's somebody who has one more question they want to get in. All right, otherwise I have
I have
one.
answered all the. Oh, sorry.
I wondered, you were talking about the role of sound in narrative, telling the story or working on the subconscious. Do you have any key favorites in film or television that stick out for you as influences or just really great examples that you love to go to?
Oh gosh, there's so many. In fact, this year's Oscar noms, just because it's on my head in recent, were really the final selection. The finals for the Oscars were really interesting. Like Zone of Interest was really incredible because it was basically off-camera horror, and the horror was, of course, the juxtaposition of the kind of mundane everyday life with this obscenely spectacularly horrific drama happening off screen. That is an incredibly amazing way to use sound. In fact, none of those sounds that are off camera actually existed in the recording. So all those actors were recorded with none of that in existence. They had to design that and put that in later. So that's an incredible example. Oppenheimer, if you did see Oppenheimer, I thought Oppenheimer was really amazing. There's a podium scene where you really see him kind of go through his Oppenheimer has his inner turmoil, and there was very strategic elements omitted, augmented in order to bring the viewer into his experience and kind of his breakdown of what has he done. So that's a really incredible example. Society of Snow. If you guys haven't seen Society of the Snow, you got to see that. I feel like that. I know that what didn't make the shorts on the Oscars this year, but Bayona killed that. That director's fantastic. He also directed another film that I really is one of my favorites called The Orphanage, which is also in Spanish, El Orfanato. It's fantastic. It's kind of a classic thriller horror film, but with magical realism. So it's got kind of like a Peter Pan, beautiful vibe to it as well. But Society of Snow is amazing. And actually, that might be interesting to watch as students because it's kind of the same story as the movie Alive, which was done like 20, 25 years ago or whatever. But it's such a different telling. It really shows how our craft can depict a different voice and perspective the same narrative, the same narrative. So I highly recommend checking out Alive and then Society of the Snow. And the sound was exceptional. I don't know if that helps.
Do you have time for one more from Josue?
Josue, how can I help you?
Yeah, I was wondering if you had any like sound effect libraries that you recommend, because sometimes I get ads for like Artlist.io, or like
Sure,
I think the
sure.
Sony Music Group has one as well that's like
Mhm.
full of all their licensed stuff. I didn't know if you had one that you use,
I
or that
mean,
is kind of like,
there's always there's a library that I'm going to recommend that every sound person is kind of silently throwing a tomato at me right now. But if you're just starting out and you don't have a library, the Sound Ideas library kind of has a little bit of everything. So you won't not have something that you need that's basic. But that being said, you need more than that library. That's not just a library, so that people can take their tomatoes away from me as well. Because they're the tomatoes, because it's kind of a quintessential, but also basic library. I personally like collecting the libraries of different sound artists and sound designers. Like Tim Preble is really fantastic. Like I like to look for particular artists and see them do something really good. Yeah, so Eraserhead was done with Alan Split. He's got an incredible library of abstract sounds and hums and tones that were done with surface miking, which is kind of interesting for sound design. There's also a ton of wildlife, amazing things that you maybe want a specific library for a specific project, that type of thing. Yeah, Charles Deanan, you can't get better guns. Yeah, I mean, like, yeah, but I like artists, but I also think I like that because I'm supporting individual artists as well. They're fellow craftspeople, you know. Yeah.
Well, thanks so much. This was just terrific. I really appreciate it. And
Yeah, sorry, I can go about sound. I feel like I was, yeah.
we loved it. Much appreciated.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Cool.